of the Commitment to Clockout series for research administrators to help you save more time in your day and get 20 more hours of work done in a week without actually adding 20 more hours into your day. So, how do we do that? Let's find out. Today, we're going to be talking about notifications and flow. And when I was writing about this, I was thinking about there's a time where I was so excited at the prospect of being told when something needed to be done or when something happened automatically by like my technology. When I got an email or a text, my phone would tell me, what a magical thing, right? No longer did I need to go to a folder and like grab my emails. They simply came down. What started as a love affair with notifications quickly became a nightmare as every app for every purpose started notifying me about every action. I turned off most of my notifications and simply left on the ones that I cared about: emails, text messages, things like that. About 8 years ago, I was working at my sister's house and I started feeling flush. She was worried about me and she took my blood pressure. I don't remember what it was, but it was high enough that she wanted to take me to the emergency room. I was there for hours and I left with no help and no reassurance. It was an absolute terrible experience. I'd been trying to manage my blood pressure with medications and diet changes and things like that, but honestly, it wasn't enough. And so I started dabbling in mindfulness again, right? It worked once. Why not go back to it, right? And that was actually the beginning of my commitment to clocking out and reframing my perspective on my time and my notifications. Now, in this video, we're going to debunk many of the excuses that we use to keep our notifications pinging, but we'll also cover use cases where you might want to keep them on and how you can set boundaries around that and make it work for you in a mindful way. Because ultimately, none of the ideas that we talk about in this series are about a blanket application of any of them. It's about figuring out what you want your life to look like and how much you want to let technology interfere with your productivity and attention. So let's start by talking a little bit about the impact of keeping your notifications on. So I've been training on this topic for about 7 years now, all over the country. And what's interesting is that there has been a culture shift since I started talking about it. Back in the day, the idea that notifications were a bad thing was a new idea. It was the before time still for many. They hadn't seen the dark side yet of notifications. But when I was updating my research for this video, the tone of the articles has actually changed. And now most of the articles are no longer trying to convince the population or anyone or readers or listeners that the notifications are a bad thing. And in fact, it sounds like everyone's in agreement that they know that notifications cause tension, that they know that they cause anxiety, a lack of productivity, and damage relationships. And it's a given at this point for many of us. The real issue actually seems to be a quick aversion to the idea. I know that notifications are bad, but I need them on. And just leaving it at that. Like, rarely do we sit and think about each type of notification and whether or not we need it and how it's impacting us. And that goes back to what we talked about in earlier videos about the fear of change and a lack of control. We've gotten so addicted to the need to know what's happening at all times. The idea that there may be a time where we don't know what's coming in is actually quite scary. And studies have actually shown that notifications have locked us into this dilemma. Without notifications, in many studies, participants feel less distracted and more productive, but they at the same time feel like they aren't able to be as responsive as expected, which made them anxious, right? So we're sort of in a catch-22 here, which means that simply not being able to access the notifications is what's creating the anxiety. It's not really necessarily what's there. It's worth mentioning that in that same study, the tactic that they used for the control was to have them batch check their notifications 3 times a day instead. And those participants felt more attentive, more productive. They were in a better mood and in greater control of their phones. So periodic checking of your emails and not having any notifications on, or your notifications periodically checking them, is a great option. If you don't want to turn them off entirely, you can silence them and then go check them at specific times that you schedule or batch them. The other issue is that for many people who keep their notification on, they have a reduced cognitive state and work more often, work longer. A Harvard study conducted showed that for every distraction, you lose 23 minutes. So every distraction that you have during your day, you lose 23 minutes. And notifications cause the average professional to spend 1.5, so 1.5 to 2 hours a day in a reduced state of cognitive performance, okay? 1.5 to 2 hours. So for many research administrators, this manifests as like our 2 p.m. exhaustion or starting to get tired earlier than you remember getting tired years ago Maybe you thought it was COVID. Maybe you thought it was age, or maybe you thought it was something else. Now, here's something else to think of, right? Because if you're working in a reduced cognitive state, now you'll need more time to do everything else you're doing in that time. So now you are losing time simply because your notifications are on. Okay. So turning off these notifications will optimize the work you're able to do when you're not in your communication apps, thereby getting more efficiency out of your day, making it so that you don't have to work as many hours, you can get more done and you feel less behind. Now, here's something else that we don't talk a lot about, and that is the individual physical impact of each buzz, ping, or visual or auditory notification. Now, you know how when you get a ping, a vibration, or a notice, that little pop-up in the bottom of your window, there's a feeling that is associated with it, okay? It's like just pay attention. You'll feel it, right? That is your body releasing hormones in response to a trigger, okay? So your phone's set on vibrate, your notifications are on, your desktop notifications, all of them, you get a feeling, okay? Now, we talked earlier about how you lose 3 minutes each time you're distracted. That is what counts. So you see that notification, you just lost 23 minutes. You hear a buzz, you just lost 23 minutes. And you're getting a shot of cortisol every time. So you're losing the 23 minutes each time. It compounds. You're getting a shot of cortisol each time. That compounds. And now that builds up during the day. The entire distraction level is growing and growing, again, putting you in a place where by the end of the day, you feel really spent. And by the end of the week, it's all over. On Friday, exhaustion strikes, you just pass out and you're like barely able to recover before the week starts again. Here's what I want you to do. Sort of earlier, it's in alignment with that journal exercise we did last week. For the next week, here's what I want you to think about. I want you to take note of how often your planned activity was derailed each time you checked your email or got a notification. Okay, so here's how you're going to do it. Each time that happens, each time you get a notification or a ping, write down 1. At the end of the day, add up the number of ones and multiply that number by 23. That's how many minutes you added to your workday. As in, that's how much time of productivity you lost. 23 minutes per bzz, bzz. And then the question becomes, is that one notification worth that much time? And 2, was there any of those notifications that you feel that by stopping what you were doing and going and taking care of it, that could not have been handled at your set time, right? That you couldn't have handled your set time. Is it really worth all of that? Especially when there's another way for you to get more done simply by making a change to the workflow. Now, let's talk about how this operationally, I'm going to give you some examples here. Okay. So operationally in a day, you're working on a transfer. Okay. Think about this. Picture it. Sicily. You're working on a transfer and you reasonably can expect that transfer to take about an hour or 2. You know, you just know that that's how long that particular one will take. Using the statistics we talked about in episode 6, you see some notifications about email. You get distracted for a few minutes looking at the notification. You decide mentally whether you need to deal with it. You prioritize mentally. Okay. You're lost. At this point, you're looking over here. Now you've lost what? Where am I? Where was I? Oh, right. Okay. Depending on the day or the time, you may get a ton of these notifications. So you're constantly looking over to see what's there. And let's assume that for most of them, they're not particularly useful. They're just costing you those 23 minutes and your distraction and your attention, but you don't actually need to do anything with it. Okay. Now you get a pang when one catches your eye. Okay. Now, that particular thing, if you really thought about it, you could handle in 40 minutes from now when you're done with doing this transfer. But you got the pang, you're anxious, now your mind is partially there and partially on this transfer. You're trying to focus. So what do? If you choose to work on the transfer, your mind is partially elsewhere and you're still kind of half there, half here, and now you're performing significantly less effectively than you were 10 minutes ago, right? Even considering, right? So before taking those notifications, now even worse, right? Now you're not going to be able to finish this transfer now simply because the time it will take you to complete this particular transfer with your current cognitive state based off of the distraction level is 4 to 5 hours. So now you need to push it to some other day. So now that sense of satisfaction that you could have gotten is gone. Another option is say, all right, I'm not going to try to do the transfer. I'm just going to take care of the email and then come back to the transfer. In that case, again, similar thing. Next time you do it, the transfer gets moved off. How often have you said to yourself, I've been meaning to finish that transfer or finish that thing for months. I simply cannot get to it. That is a result of having these kinds of things happen. Now, here's what I recommend for figuring out how you want to deal with those kinds of notifications. For each one you get, ask yourself, is this something that I could have looked at in an hour? If the answer is yes, more often than not, then blocking off time to turn off your notifications may be an option for you. I personally have all of my notifications off and then manually go to my email, manually go to my chats, manually go to my phones at regular intervals during the day. All over yourself, in Stop Shitting All Over Yourself with Tanessa Shears, we talk about that and about productivity and having our notifications off. Now, there's another type of impact that having notifications on can have, and that's on your relationships. Now, for some people, they can ignore vibrations and it doesn't impact them. The phone bzzz, and it doesn't impact them. They don't even hear it. But for a large swath of the population, hearing those vibrations or pings creates a visual change in their attention to another person. So if you're in a meeting with an individual and it's just the two of you, then depending on the type of notification, it can be annoying at minimum, all the way up to dismissive at maximum. I've been on calls where I'm talking about something that the listener has specifically asked about, only to realize that they completely checked out about what I was saying a few minutes earlier because they had a notification that they got an email and were contemplating how they should reply to that email, and now they were either half listening to me or already focused on the other task. It devalues time, it erodes trust, and it creates a feeling of not being important to the other person. To be honest, I actually turned off all of my notifications in response to how I noticed I was feeling when people started ignoring me for brief sections of meetings while they attended to other things. Something I would recommend is to start to pay attention in meetings, how it feels when you're on a call with someone and you can tell when they've started looking at emails and are totally distracted from what you're saying or looking at a notification. How does that make you feel? What about when you're on a call with someone and an email notification pops up? How do you feel in your body physically? Right? Do you feel good? Do you get distracted? Are you giving this person your full attention? Based off of however you decide you're feeling, adjust accordingly. Because again, this isn't about applying everything as I say. It is about recognizing that there are options available between getting all notifications and getting all emails and having all of it like that and turning them all off. You can create conditional notifications. You can set up VIP protocols for your VIPs. You can silence your notifications for an hour at a time instead of all the time. Plenty of different opportunities available. Now, the whole point is to set up a VIP protocol for your VIP investigators. Silence notifications an hour at a time instead of all the time. What we're essentially trying to do here is create and generate opportunities for flow time where you can get really, really serious work done. You can set up a VIP protocol for your VIPs or silence notifications for just an hour at a time instead of all the time. The ultimate goal here is to be able to create flow time for yourself. And we're going to dive deeper next week into that. These are not the only ways. There are plenty of other tactics and techniques you could use. I would absolutely love to hear them in the comments because ultimately this is the beginning of the conversation. It's not meant to be the conversation. I believe strongly that when we crowdsource our responses, we get the most opportunity for efficiency and effectiveness. So please share your opportunities in here. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube so you don't miss a single time-saving video. I will see you on our next episode and we'll talk about flow time.